Okay, we are in Daniel chapter 3 and about verse 12. We have talked about the fact that the King Nebuchadnezzar, has set up a graven image that is approximately 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide, and has commanded that everyone fall down and worship this when there is music that is played. And there are three individuals, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, have not done that, and they're known by their Babylonian names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And in verse 12, beginning in verse 9 rather, there are Chaldeans that it brings up to the king. They complain to the king that these individuals are not falling down. And verse 12, we see pretty clearly what their motive is. They are jealous that these Jews have been set over affairs of the kingdom, and they make some accusations against the king. And what are those accusations?
They hadn't regarded the king, they hadn't served his gods, and worshipped him.
Okay. First, they say that they have no regard for the king. Is that a true accusation? No, it's not a true accusation. And it's interesting when individuals want to bring up things against other individuals. They will take a point and they'll push it to the farthest point that they possibly can, and they'll go over the edge and drag it even further, right? Well, if this is true and that is true, then this other thing's got to be true too. And sometimes when they add up all their points, the things don't add up correctly. Just because an individual doesn't believe in idolatry doesn't mean that they're not serving the king correctly. And so their first accusation about not serving the king or having regard to the king, and meaning that they're not serving him correctly, wasn't true. There was no truth in that, and they brought no evidence against them in a correct fashion. And in the issue of serving his gods, well, that's true and that's not true, isn't it? Nebuchadnezzar wanted individuals in his court that would serve the kingdom. And in the sense of serving the kingdom, they were serving his gods, correct? That's really what he wanted to have happen. So the only thing that was actually true in this statement was that they wouldn't bow down. Okay? That was really the only thing that was true here. So they were stretching it as far as they possibly could. Now we see Nebuchadnezzar in verse 13 reverting back to what we see in chapter 2 as well. He has this tendency to kind of fly off into a rage, does he not? So he speaks in verse 13, and he says he goes into a rage and he wants these individuals to come before him. But notice, he gives them the opportunity to speak. He may be angry, but he still gives them an opportunity to answer the charges that's been laid against them. Okay? Now, he still issues it with a threat, but he still gives them an opportunity. And I want you to see kind of both sides of this individual. He may be rash, but he, in some fashion, is trying to be somewhat fair. Shall we? Maybe that's not the right word, but he tries to follow some fashion of court etiquette, or allowing them to answer the charges at least, okay? So in verse 14, Nebuchadnezzar speaks to them and he says, "Is it a truth?" Okay? So he doesn't outright charge them. He doesn't condemn them right off the get-go. It may be accusatory in the tone, but he gives them an opportunity to answer. Is it true that you are doing this? He obviously didn't see it himself. And perhaps there may be a little bit of distrust to the Chaldeans like he had in chapter 2. But whatever be the case, he gives them an opportunity. Is it true, O Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego, that you did not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I set up? Notice he didn't mention anything about not having regard for me. Now, if they don't serve his gods, he's going to take that as a charge against him, isn't he? That's kind of the way that one works, doesn't it? Okay? Now we see the accusatory tone, right, in verse 15. Now, if ye be ready. Perhaps you weren't ready the first time. Perhaps you didn't hear it the first time. Now, if you be ready, now you hear that accusatory tone. I'm going to give you a chance now to follow through. So if you weren't ready the first time, or if you didn't hear the first time, or whatever your reasons were the first time, I'm going to give you an opportunity now. All will be forgiven if you fall down. But, and what's the but? If you don't, what's going to happen? Okay. Now I'm going to throw you into the fire. We didn't hear this before, did we? Now all of a sudden this threat comes with this fire. I'm going to throw you into this burning fiery furnace. Not only that, he lets himself go so far as to make another accusation. What was that? Yeah, who is that God that can save you out of my hand? Have we heard this kind of thing before? The Pharaoh in Egypt. Who is that God that I should listen to his voice? That didn't work out real well for the Pharaoh, did it? Okay.
Well, Nebuchadnezzar the last time said that Daniel's God was a God of gods. You know? But he changed his tune a little period of time. Went back to his old meaning.
Yeah, and I suggested to you he hadn't given up his idea of pantheons of gods. He just included Daniel's God in his pantheon of gods. And here's the proof. He still, to Daniel, he may consider Daniel's God as something great, but the problem is he still hadn't given up his other gods. He's not going to give up his gods here either, but he's going to learn a lesson yet, even at that. So who is that God that can save you out of my hand? Now I want you to think for a moment, what about this fiery furnace? We're not told where it's at, what it's about, or anything about this fiery furnace, but I want you to think about it for a minute. Obviously, it was there. Obviously, they weren't having to go any distance in order to throw them into that fiery furnace. And I would suggest to you, it must have been within eyesight of that image for them to see it. What was the purpose of it? Could it have been a kiln for them to make bricks? Could it have been in a foundry for them to melt the gold, for them to make that image of gold? I don't know what its purpose was, but there was some reason for that furnace.
Maybe it was to put fear into their hearts, as it naturally would.
Okay. Now, how is the furnace built? Think about a furnace for a moment. You build a furnace, and the way a furnace is made, you have to have some place to put in the fuel, whatever that fuel might be, the oil that they used, the natural gas that they used. You could actually use wood, but I would suggest that's probably not what was used here. And then you have an entry place for air, the oxygen that has to burn, because you have to have oxygen and fuel in order to have a fire, right? And a furnace is built in such a way that it has a column that goes up so that it sucks, as heat rises, it sucks air up that column. And the higher you have that column or tower or chimney, the more air it sucks into the bottom, and the higher and hotter you can make your furnace. And so if you put doors on it, you can close it down, enclose the heat on the inside of it so you can make your kiln, make your foundry, make whatever it is that you're using that furnace for. So you have doors on the bottom to help throttle the air, and perhaps you have a door at a higher level so that you can put in whatever you need to put in at different levels to regulate your heat. Okay? So you getting a picture of what we may be seeing? So that plays a part in what we're about to hear as we go on further into our story. I don't know what it was for. I don't know why it was there, but it was there. And he was using it to strike fear into their hearts. Okay? All right. Verse 19. Excuse me. We were in verse 15. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said unto the king, O king, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. So what are they saying? We are not careful. Okay. All right. Yeah, basically, we don't need time. We don't have to converse among ourselves in order to figure out how to answer you. The decision's already been made. We know how to answer you. You know, Christians are told to do what? Anytime that we are asked about the hope that lies within us, that we're supposed to answer it with meekness and with fear. I think you're seeing a perfect example of that right here. These individuals are going to answer the king correctly and calmly and in a perfect answer to what the king has asked them. Now, this has got to be a really difficult thing to do. Here is a man who's full of fury, who is angry, who is all stirred up emotionally. Think that's hard to control your emotions at that time when you have to answer a person like this? Okay? But they are going to answer him calmly and in the right attitude and in the right way. We don't have to be careful. We know exactly how to answer you, O king. We don't have to get together. We don't have to ask for more time. We know exactly what our answer is going to be, O king. All right? If it be so, if what be so? If you throw us into the furnace. That was the threat, right? If it be so, if you choose to do that. Okay, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. Our God is able. Okay? If it be so, if you choose to do that, then our God is able to do that. And he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. They had confidence in God. He is able to do that. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Their answer was calm, clear, make no bones about it, O king. We don't have to take time to answer you. We know exactly what our answer is going to be. We will not bow down to this image. It's not proper for us. It's not right. Okay? Perfect answer for a Jew to a pagan king, right? You can do whatever you want. You can throw us into, you can threaten us, you can do whatever you want to do, but either way you choose to go, this is our answer. Either way, we will not bow down to that image. So how did Nebuchadnezzar take that? I'd say not very happy was an understatement. You know.
Furious.
Furious, full of fury, it says.
He was mad the first time, he was more mad.
Yeah, he's more madderer. Yeah, yeah, he's full of fury.
Well, they, from his standpoint, they had rebelled against the king. He'd made a law, and they said, we're not going to obey it. And so he was mad the first time, and then he gave him a second chance, and usually he probably thought, well, they'll give in now because they're not going to say no to my face. You know, it's one thing to say no from a distance, but when you're in the presence of the power, then he probably thought, I'll show them, they're going to bow down to me, and they didn't. And so that was a real, for an arrogant individual like that, that was a real spit in the face to him. But they weren't. You know, they didn't do anything wrong other than disobey a law they couldn't obey.
And you've got to remember, they are doing this in front of all these
Other
people, in front of all the nations that Nebuchadnezzar had power over. There's representatives from every nation that Nebuchadnezzar had power over. So this is a very visual thing. So Nebuchadnezzar is really trying to assert his authority here. And here these Jews, whom he had taken into his into the castle itself, he'd given them his food, and allowed him part of his kingdom, and gave him authority, and they're rebelling against him in front of everyone. Yeah, this doesn't set well with him. You could see how that would not set well with anybody in a certain circumstance, but in particularly this one, this is really not setting well with him. He's extremely angry. He wants to show his power.
Well, they had laid down the gauntlet now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they,
In his eyes.
well, yeah, and the eyes of the people too. And if he allows this, then everybody else will ignore him as well. He's got a direct challenge he has to deal with. Not something a leader wants to see. And in fact, it probably indicates a weak leader at this point.
That's the way he will view it, yes. He will. I'm going to be viewed as a weak leader if I don't do something.
You gotta fix it.
Okay.
He was the one who put them in the position they were in at the end of chapter 2.
Correct.
Daniel petitioned him to, they were in position in his kingdom that people looked to them, and now they're embarrassing him, I guess, in a way.
Sure.
It's what he looked at it, I think, for sure.
Okay.
He was doing a foolish thing, though. He was challenging the God who he knew was the only God that could answer what his dream was and the interpretation of it. And so, obviously, he ignored that earlier information because he challenged the wrong person. He wasn't challenging Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. they were going to burn in fire. Had it not been for God, he challenged God.
Now, who is that God that can save you out of my hands? He was challenging God, that's true. He had forgotten that but see, he's viewing the God of Daniel as the God who can interpret dreams. There is no God that can save after this sort. And we'll see that verbiage used here in a minute. Okay, so the form of his visage was changed. I forgot what the King James says there. His countenance. I'm sorry? Expression on his face. His countenance is changed. One of the versions says basically his whole demeanor changes. He was angry at first, but now his whole demeanor has changed. And he was giving them some rope, some ability to, but now, no. Everything has changed. Okay, so he commands that the furnace be heated 7 times more hot than it was wont to be heated. Okay, so you can see the poor guy that designed the furnace. He's trying to figure out how he's going to get it that hot, right? All right. So can you imagine this furnace, which wasn't designed to be heated as hot, because it's hotter than it was wont to be heated. It wasn't designed to be this hot. So fire's belching out of this thing. Because of the king's command, they're now stoking this thing up higher and higher and higher, and it wasn't designed for this. It's basically what we're seeing, right? Flames are possibly shooting out of it. I don't know. Maybe you could hear the whistling of the air as it's being sucked in the bottom and it's shooting out of the top because it's so hot. All right, but it wasn't meant to be this hot. It wasn't designed to work this way. So they've already got a problem. Okay.
It had to be really hot because they killed the men that took Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego to the furnace.
Right. And that's what we're getting to in the next verse. They were all, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were bound in all their clothing. And the things that they're talking about here, their hosen, their turbans, their garments, we're talking about they were dressed for a royal type of a atmosphere. They were in their what am I trying to say there? Yeah, their Sunday best. It's a royal engagement. So they're dressed to the nines, I guess is what you would say. But they didn't take time to do anything else. They just wrapped them up in exactly what they were wearing, and they tightened them up, and they took them towards the furnace. Okay? Verse 22, we see exactly what we're talking about. The flame was so hot, and it killed the men that was taking them to the furnace. All right. Now we see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They fall down into the furnace. So somehow or another, they're at a higher point, and they fall down into it. So I don't know if the men were behind. That makes sense. The soldiers are behind them. The flames come out. They consume the soldiers behind them, and because they're leaning up against them, somehow they fall into the furnace. They open the door up, and the flames come out. I don't know exactly how it happened. Well, but all we know for sure is they fall into the furnace. So it would seem that they're at a higher level. Verse 24. then the king is astonished. He doesn't believe what he's seeing, right? It would seem that he's sitting on something. He's at some perch where he can actually peer into the furnace. He's expecting to see something, but he's not seeing what he's expecting to see, right? And he raises up, he gets himself up, and he looks, he gets closer, and he asks his counselors, he says, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" And they answer him, "What? True, O king. Yeah, that's what we did." Yeah, it's not wise to disagree with him at this point. All right? In verse 25 says, "Lo, I see 4 men loose walking around in the fire." Now, this is not what we would call an everyday event. Four men loose walking around in the fire. We put 3 men in, and there's 4 men walking around. Nebuchadnezzar's, something's not right here. Yeah, he might have liked to have Daniel at his side at this point in time. He really would have liked to. Okay, and there's something different about the 4th. And depends on the version that you're using. The King James Version says the Son of God. The American Standard used a son of the gods. The Aramaic lends itself more to a son of the gods. But the indication here is that this individual is of deity. Now, what made him think that it was deity? I can't tell you. I don't know if his countenance was brighter. I don't know if it was his clothing. I don't know, something about the way he walked. I had no idea. It doesn't explain. But it was something about that 4th person that made him look like he was someone divine. An angel, or, in fact, that's what he calls him in the next verse, is an angel. An angel means what? A messenger. That's literally what angel means, is a messenger. Okay? Now, many commentators, many conservative commentators, believe that this is the pre-incarnate Christ. I'm not going to argue with that. If you will look into the Old Testament and look up the term the angel of the Lord, or the angel of Jehovah, that personage is always talked about as being deity, being God. Abraham spoke to one of the angels, and that angel was deity. He was God. And many individuals think that was the pre-incarnate Christ. There's several examples of individuals who spoke to the angel of the Lord, and I'm using the definite article, not an angel, but the angel of the Lord, and that being that personage being spoken to as being God. I spoke to God, therefore I will die. And then, so that's an interesting study. I'm not going to go into it any further this evening, but I would suggest that if you are interested in that line of thought, that you go through that study. I think it's an interesting study. But many individuals believe that this is that same personage being the pre-incarnate Christ. Verse 26, Nebuchadnezzar comes near to the mouth of the furnace, and he asks them, says, "Come forth, come hither, come out of the fire." You notice his attitude has changed drastically. Nebuchadnezzar is no longer this raging maniac that he was a few moments ago. Now he speaks with a whole lot of respect. Please come out. He's beckoning to them. Now notice in verse 27 that everyone now comes around these individuals. They come around them and they notice certain things about them. That their bodies, there was the fire had no effect on them at all. Their hair is not singed. Their coats are not changed. Their clothing is not changed in any way. There's not even the smell of fire on them. What does that indicate to you? Okay, they were completely isolated from it. There was no trickery here. There's no way you can get close to a fire of that sort, and particularly of that heat, and not at least have your eyebrows singed, right? You ever lit a gas stove and it flare up on you? I mean, you know your eyebrows are singed, right? There's no way you're not going to have some hair singed. You're going to have that stenchy hair burn smell on you for a couple of days. I mean, that happens.
Well, there was one thing changed about them. They went in bound, and it says when they were walking around, they were loose. So either the binding burned off or the angel unbound them.
But the fire didn't touch them. And that's the point here. But you're right. Mm-hmm.
And they were probably in the fire for a while. When this started, the fire was so hot that coming to the mouth of the furnace, 2 people died. Then after this took place, Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth. They had to wait for this fire to get cooled down a little bit before he could have gotten closer. He would have died too. So it wasn't like they went in and walked out, real quick. They were in there for a while.
Yeah, I can't tell you how long they were in there, but they were in long enough that obviously the fire would have done them damage.
Oh yeah, they would have died. They would have died immediately like the other 2.
Correct.
But in addition to that, they were in there for a while. Because,
Because they were walking around.
yeah. And Nebuchadnezzar couldn't have come to the mouth without dying himself.
Okay? So this shows that this was not trickery. They weren't wearing special garb. We have special, what do you call them?
Fire retardant.
Yeah, we have fire garden, but in the TV shows and on movies, you got, what do you call those guys? Stuntmen is what I'm trying to say. You got stuntmen that would put on special garbs, and they weren't wearing some type of special garb or thing of this nature that protected them. They came out because of a miracle. There's no doubt that there was a miracle. So Nebuchadnezzar speaks, and he blesses the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sends his messenger or his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, okay, and changed the king's word. He didn't just ignore the king's word, he changed the king's word, see? And he accredits their God to changing the king's word. He realized now he had challenged the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay? And it says that they yielded their bodies that they might not serve or worship any god except their own God. Now notice, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't says our God, he says their God. He's still a polytheist. He still has not got the message yet. He's not going to get the message until the next chapter.
Or the next verse.
But he promotes Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the kingdom because he realized the first portion of that accusation that they were not serving the king correctly was a false accusation. All right. Next week, if you will take a look at the handout, the old world empires about Babylonia, we will talk about that a little bit before we go into chapter 4. Thank you very much for your kind attention.